Look at that flag. The snow. Louisiana's had more snow than us this year. That's not right. And it's cold. So we're going to talk about cold weather camping today. Cold weather RVing. Full time in the Northland. Or the almost, but not quite. I wouldn't. Buy an RV, they said. It'll be fun. Until the water heater goes out in February. Alright, so we'll start with the vestibule, we call it. This is our entryway. This is a game changer. This is real life, no edits. When you live on a farm in the Midwest, upper Midwest, we got our resident ditch tiger. So I got a finished foam, but this makes a big difference. We just stuff this in there. That helps it keep its shape, and it gives us a clean spot and helps with the temps in here a little bit. So the first time we did this, we weren't sure if the wind was going to blow it, and it did, and it blew it in front of the door. So as I was in a high-rise doing stuff, I got a call from headquarters because my wife was trying to get a hold of me because the wind blew it in front of the door, and it all ended up fine, but it makes for a fun story. But so we added these, and these are just big, I don't know, 12-inch purlin spikes. You get them in a big kit, but so that's how we do it, and that's all that it needs to hold it down. Especially in the winter, this is poly deck boards, and that just keeps the wood up. It helps us level it, and it also just kind of gives a barrier while we're dealing with frost and freezing and the water coming in and whatnot. Okay, so figuring out the fit, we had to get a little creative. So problems that we had to solve. In the wintertime, we put our skirting on that changes the distance from the trailer, so we have to figure out how to fill that gap. So we have a come on. Well, it's supposed to be autofocus. So we have a gap here that we fill. We started using pipe insulation. It looks kind of like a pool noodle, but it doesn't stay well, and it doesn't always fill a gap. So this is just sill insulation that we stapled on. That fills that gap. Up at the top, you can see that green and then purple. That's just a pool noodle that we split and slid it up over the end of the tin. That gives kind of a gasket to seal it, and it also helps protect our awning, because as with all of this stuff, it has to be built, and you have to think about your trailer is probably never going to be in exactly the same spot, and it is something that we have to check before we commit for skirting and stuff in the air, that the trailer is set high enough that everything fits underneath it. So here's a better view. As you can see, this is what that pipe insulation looks like going up in there. And the pool noodle. So there's a little bit, like it'll blow some if we get bad snow, but it's still not that big a deal. And the amount of heat and grief it saves us by not losing everything every time you open the door. And then having the extra storage for boots and egg buckets and animals and bags and who knows what other treasures the kids bring in. It's invaluable. Almost forgot one of the most important parts is how we move this thing. So in the corners, in here you can see, this one I drilled a little off, but there's a big hole right here. And then what we do is we've got I don't know, they're pneumatic wheels, but like something you might find on a lawnmower. And then we jack this up. We lift it with a big pry bar. Actually, it's a broken old bale tine, and then a 4x4. But then we lift it up, and then we drive in that wheel's on a big bolt. We drive it in from the outside, but then this whole thing is up on wheels, and then we push it and just roll it right out of the way. Then we can move it around the yard when we need to go. It's pretty slick. So we'll just do a quick walk around. So all of this white stuff, this is the foil faced, this is 1 inch, and this is what we call the skin. An important thing to take away from this, well, let's see, is there a piece that's not upside down so you can read it? Here. Try to get the gimbal out, or the camera out. All right, well anyway, so this is the Owens Corning. They make most of this foam board. This is their tape product. It is by far, without question, the best tape that we've found. Downside is that it is sticky, and you want to try to pull it while it's still a little cool, and you are going to have to use adhesive removers to get it off. But it holds up to snow and rain and temperature swings, so like this has made it all winter. And we haven't had to redo any of this right here. That we might have just put this on a little tight. So, but when people are complaining and having trouble with tape, this is your solution. And that's the best I can tell you. We'll get around. So here's a good spot to talk about. So this white stuff we redid this year. This is what we used to have, or the first generation. And this is just regular pink foam board. But if you watch, see, I can do that. UV rays and stuff are not good on this. That's hard to tell, but just by rubbing, I've dug into that. So this stuff has aged out just due to exposure from the elements. What we're hoping is that this does better. Time will tell. We'll keep you posted. Let's see. Thing number 2 to probably tell you about is on most of the bottoms, this is an additional piece, so it's like a trim piece. So it will be easier to see when we get to the inside and we look inside out from some of the stuff. But we put these on last, so sometimes we have to shim these panels up to get everything to be flat and level and fit together right. Well, then what this does is this allows us to come back at the end and we just push these flush with the ground. We can grade the gravel out, whatever we want to do, and then we just screw these into the panels, into them themselves. So, and all of those are pre-cut. So as we're looking at this, this is a panel here. So if you kind of watch, when you see vertical lines like this, so this is going to be a break. So this is a panel, and that's a panel. And you're just going to have to accept the camera work today. Apparently our gimbal is missing a piece and the sun is facing the wrong direction. When we started building this, I started on this side, and so you'll see like some of this isn't quite as nice or as clean as it will be on the other side. And I'll explain the lessons over there. But so what happens here is this was all nice and flush with the trailer, and then I got over here and had to figure out how to get the gap away from the plastic fender skirting. And so we ended up with this not so pretty piece there. Coming around, so each of these, so this is all one panel. We have a panel that fits here, and then we had a piece here. Like I said, some of this was learning how to figure things out. Then we're going across. We cut out for the door. Initially we didn't do that, and it was way harder, and you couldn't open the door except in emergency. But this is definitely the better play. On top of there, if you can't quite see, so there's 6 inches, so those are 2-inch thick pieces of foam, and there's 3 of them, and that allows us to, it helps support the snow load on top of, or so that it doesn't sag and beat up our slide toppers, but it also gives us quite a bit of thermal insulation as well. That's a little tricky to get up there. because it's, I think the slide is 10 feet, maybe 10, 13, 14, but so they have to be seamed together, and the only way to do it is to let the awning out and then fit it in between the pieces. So you got to do it on a day where there's not a lot of wind and you have ladders, but it's not the end of the world, and it's worth every ounce. Coming around, so back panel. So again, you can see the pink. So this is an older piece, an older version. We will throw in a video right here that talks about how we do the water. So the weather's great today, and we're fighting a water heater problem. Because of that, we have to have everything open, so you get to see how we do water. It's snowing and 20 below. So we've got heat tape for the hydrant that's insulated with this, and then we've got our heated hose that's in here. We built the box. It's got 2 or 3 inch insulation, so this is at least R13. Then we buy these insulated covers. And the important piece, if you have heated hoses, is that you have to cut a little hole so that your sensor can hang out. So it knows to run based off of that. So we close our door here, and then we run. So each of these are big 10 gauge cords that feed the heaters underneath, and then we keep our hose up on a piece of this foam. That foil is supposed to make it a little fire resistant. And then we cap that with this box. Excuse me, getting ahead of myself. When you're a firefighter, you get access to things like old retired fire gear. So we've been covering it with that, and then we put the cap on. And that's what gets us from water housing to the trailer. And then because we haven't had, usually the snow insulates all the cracks, nooks and crannies and crevices, because this year's been droughty, even for snowy parts of the world. We've had to get a little creative. So again, we'll use some old stuff. That's the short version on how we're getting by. So this side's better. This side's a lot more polished. We had to make some changes this year, and then so because this is the north facing, it really didn't need to have the skin replaced, but because of the things that we did, we ended up doing it anyway. So we got the cutout for the fuel doors, which is nice. We made this little pull here. So inside here, if you can't see, but that's the handle for the black tank. So we can get to that. So the difference on the other side and this side, on the other side I made shorter panels, and this is actually one that's built that way. But the panel is built to fit underneath the trailer. So it comes in here and it goes down, and then the skin goes up and covers this tinny piece. If you can kind of see it, but it's built out of this stuff. So you get insulation for this part, so it's covered, and then there's usually a gap. And then, so again, I'm talking about how your trailer ends up for the year. It allows some give to it. And then up here, it really doesn't matter if the trailer moves some, because you're just taping it to it anyway. These other ones here, I built differently, and they are built to come the entire way up. And then we have a small piece of foam that goes on the top. So the entire panel is built to fit against the side of the trailer. If I was going to do it again, I would do it all this way. It's more materials, but it's just, it's just easier because it depends a lot less on how the trailer sits, and it's easier to deal with the skins and stuff too. So, and then we've made little access hatches so that we can access our utilities. So there's that's for our back tank, and then we've got that stuff. So we still run a heated hose, but then we're also running, we have 2 space heaters in here, and sounds like one of them might be running, but I got the door open. But they're on thermostats. They only run when they have to, and each one has its own 10 gauge cord. Then they both feed to their own dedicated circuit that is off the trailer. So I've wired that in with when we put the big 50 amp for the trailer to plug in. Then I put it in independent 20 amp, just regular 3-plug circuit. So inside here, so this ratchet strap, I've played with 2x4s and straps. It just kind of depends on which one is easier and where I put it, but that's how we help hold some of this together and keep tension on it during the winter. So here's our first view, but you can kind of see we frame this. This is all framed out with 2x4s, and then most of the bases are 2x6, but then we put a thick 2-inch piece of insulation inside here, and then you can see the skin and how that kind of works out, what that looks like. Moving along, so sometimes you got to put some filler pieces in. It's no big deal. All right, so moving along, we're going to get to, this is our main access. We use a lot because this is where our gray water's at. But so same kind of deal. I have a framed out here. So hinge, and then so you got to have this, so this blocks the wind and gives something for that door to push against. Here's our first chance, so we can see, so most of these are 2x6 based, and then you can, so this here is just a shim, and this allows us to, to get the height where it needs to be. There's always some settling too, but then you can kind of see too, here again, this allows us to set that. It also gives something tougher if we're shoveling snow and things like that, so it doesn't beat it up. But there again, there's just, so we can get some idea of what this now looks like from the inside. So you can see these walls are framed out. So there we've got our lower lights on. But each of these then is going to be a panel. Hey, there's the wheels too. Then we just close that up and off we go. Keep going around in the wintertime. So we did go for the RV fridge. If I was going to do it again, I think I would probably just go with the residential. But when it gets terribly cold, and this is north facing again, we will put 2 pieces of foil tape on these top 2 baffles and then switch it to LP. And unless it's going to get 20 below and 20 plus mile-an-hour winds, that usually does us okay, and we survive just fine. But it is a thing, and if you're in the cold world, it's something to definitely just kind of keep in mind. Moving along, it's a lot more of the same coming through here. This is the only thing, so this is double wall, triple wall. It's stuff you'd use for a gas water heater in a house, but we made this pass through and then a cap, and then the exhaust pipe for the generator comes out here. And what we do, I've got it stashed up under the neck and we'll look at it, but as I made, it's just metal piping and hose and stuff, but it plugs in here and then it comes up, but it lets it convect out, and then it has another elbow. So if we do lose power, we've used it in ice storms and stuff before, but it allows us to safely run our generator and get the exhaust out and not have any problems. And that's just like small stuff to get us by, because the farm, we've got other big generators that we can run first, but we don't usually get those out unless we're talking, kind of a long-term problem or power outage. So moving along, so here's a good show here. This is where two panels come together. So we've got it, we tape up all the seams for the season, and then we get rid of them. Our slides, so this one here is the only one we do different. This is our closet. So if you can see up there, we still have, there's pieces of foam on the top like the other slide, but this one we do put them on the sides, and then we stuff this big 3-inch piece up inside here. And for the most part, it just friction fits. But that helps us with, we still, if it gets terribly cold, and we're talking sub-zeros, we do have to pay attention and make sure we leave the doors open and have air moving, because we will see frost if we're not careful, but we know it and we pay attention and we manage it. So, but you will, even doing all of this, it's still something that you have to pay attention to. Moving underneath, so we have, so this red one is actually our Ethernet cable that comes from the house that's near here, and our black is our LP line. So we have a standard like 500-gallon residential LP tank, but then it feeds up into here. And so when we're parked, when we're home and stationary, that's how we get our propane into the trailer instead of having to fill all the time. And then in here, so that's stubbed out from something else, but then that red hose just protects this big cable, and then we plug in. And if you go find, there's some bunch of Instagram shorts, and I think I made a small video, but this is how we get Ethernet to the trailer, and it makes it a lot easier for us to manage when we're at home on our home network, and when we're traveling, and not have to change passwords and deal with all of that and whatnot. So if you know, you know. If you don't, be thankful. And then so the front here, so the only big thing to talk about that I haven't already said is this here. So this tape line here is built this way. So usually what we do every year is that this is all going to come off, and then this panel is shorter here, and then let's see, you can probably somewhere in here, but then it's just wide open. So this panel lays up in like this, and that's what gets us around the big reese hitch. And then a lot of this is actually just tape, or we'll kind of fit pieces in, just puzzling with scraps to get us that far. And then now we're back to the front, and it's just more, there's another one at the bottom that helps hold it all. But then the same deal, we had to do it a little different and angle cut those. But then this gets us in our front door, which is nice. In the summer we store stuff underneath the neck like most people, and then in the wintertime this still allows us the ability to do that. So, but now here you can tell, you can get a good view. So this is what that face stuff is, silver on the back. So that's how that works. And then here's our framed walls with all of the 2-inch. So we've got 3 inches of different polystyrene, which gets us somewhere around an R13, R15 insulation value. And then this is as good as I can show you, but so we've built it to always be short. That way our panels always fit, and then we use the skin to help just manage it from the outside to fill that void. So if it's a little taller or a little shorter, it doesn't matter at all. As we go through here, you'll see I've got notes and marks how everything fits. So like I put those arrows there. Some of these, there's larger legs and stuff that we'll go through. So when I take it apart, I've got notes on how to get through things. Here again, we're looking at the shims, or the space. So this is actually quite a ways up. It's just the way that it settled this year. I do put some spikes in. I drilled a lot more the first year I did, and it took me as long to get all of them out as it did to take the entire thing apart. And it just ended up, we really don't need them as many. So, because then so here we've got bracing across the front. I always run smoke detectors down here just in case the we'd have a bad day with one of the heaters. So we've got our pads, our blocks that we use while we're parked. So there's all the wheels and that 4x4. So that's our kit to move our vestibule. We just use that big bale tine and on the 4x4 for leverage, and we just drive those wheels. I've still got the basement emptied out into here after our plumbing debacle. That video will probably come out after this one. So, but go check it out. But so most of this, all of this stuff usually lives in the basement. What the rest of this is, so this is our macerator pump, and then this box holds a lot of our hoses and stuff. But so that's how we dump our black tank, is that we pump it into the septic system here at the farm. But coming around, it's all, I mean, it's just different views of the same stuff. So each of these is a panel. Here you go, you can see I have this note here, so lag, so that's what, this isn't just poor workmanship, this is how I get in here, and I can pull this whole, this inner panel comes out, and then I can pull these bolts out to take this panel apart. So white hose, black hose, this is part of our pumping. So this is the hose that we use, or the pipe, it's not really a hose, but this is for the exhaust for the generator. So this piece here stuffs in there, and then this goes up to, we've got a fence for, we got some stuff nearby, but then this ends up being the top, so that keeps rain and everything out of it. But then it goes up high enough that it convects pretty well, and we've never had an exhaust problem or a heat problem with anything. We've only had to use it a couple times, but, and then in just case you were curious, like I said, we just kind of piece some stuff in here to help hold it and keep the birds out. But then that's how it works around, and right there you can see, so we talked on the other side, so it's just meant this part we plan to just, we'll cut that, and then all of this comes off when we store it, and then next year we just completely replace all the way across there. It's just engineered that way. But that's how we do it, guys. And we've never had, I mean, we've seen 30 below air temps and high winds, blizzard conditions. We got lucky this year, and well, lucky or not lucky, but didn't have much snow. And usually it's even warmer, so you can, if you look across, you can see a little bit of light coming in at the bottoms. You know, we are still putting it on top of rock, so you're gonna have some, you can see that side is, we had a bunch of settling actually, so you can see how that's low and it's shimmed up on actual lumber. So we've got to get some gravel in here this year. But when it snows, we go around the trailer and we will shovel and we'll pile it all up against the walls on the outside, and it helps it stay even warmer, keeps the wind from blowing underneath, and it just works pretty well. Let us know if you have more questions. We're going to talk about one more thing actually. So I want to talk about plastic. Come on. There we go. Oh, this isn't a good view. This will work. So I want to talk about plastic. And for all the things that you think you know, or that people talk about and that should be easy, our first winter when I had to figure out plastic drove me bonkers, because people kept saying, oh no, put your plastic on the outside, put your plastic on the outside. Yeah, that's not what you want to do. If you have an older trailer, or you don't have the, they call it flush mount, or the, I don't know, when it's flat on the outside, then maybe. Because the key to this plastic working is the airspace. So for us, it has to go on the inside, because our airspace is here. So we just use it tape it off on the wall. I always help use the blind pieces to help hold it. And then my advice is to leave it a little looser. If you have OCD like I do, that goes against everything that you want to do and you should be doing. But if you go really tight, we have a lot more problems with the plastic pulling. I don't know if that's movement as the temperature changes, because you'll see that. If it's just that everything's non-stick, Teflon, I don't know. But and this is the easy windows, so these are the vertical sliders. So here is another window, so you're just gonna have to manage it. Just know up front that it's gonna stick out some, and just don't get greedy when you're plasticking, when you're sealing it, when you're shrink wrapping it. And just know, see how the lens adjusts, the camera adjusts to this. But like a lot of times we don't go any further down than that, because then you got to really pull these away and then it doesn't work, and then you're stressing all this and it'll eventually let loose. But again, we also run extra curtains too that help in the summer and the winter. So, but plastic on the inside. If you have them that go on the outside, I don't know, most people don't put it on the outside. I understand if some people do and want to. But for the most part, and this deals with most of the condensation issues. When it gets terrible cold or we see big swings, you'll get some. So we've been dealing with that right now. You can see there's just a little bit inside there. And that's because we've gone from 10 degrees to 70 degrees in 48 hours. And we've had, you know, inches of rain that changed a blizzard that changed back to rain, and ice balls and snowballs, and just welcome to the Midwest. So that's it with plastic.